Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Monday. It is the 14th of April, 2025. Today is day 556. Yesterday morning on Palm Sunday, the Anglican Al-Ahli Hospital in Gaza, in the north of Gaza, was hit by two Israeli rockets. CNN reported that an Israeli airstrike yesterday incapacitated the last fully functioning hospital in Gaza City by extensively damaging its emergency room and reception area. Although no casualties were reported, at least one child died in the rushed evacuation of patients, according to a Jerusalem church that runs the facility. The IDF said that they had struck a Hamas command and control center, an allegation that the militant group denied. It's astounding to me that in the past 2 days, I've done interviews for the Egyptian, news, for Arabic news sources that want to know about realities that are happening in Gaza. And there's been virtually no news about the bombing of a hospital in general, let alone a Christian hospital that belongs to, or is run by the Anglican Archdiocese of Jerusalem. I can't find any major news sources that have reported on this story and really talked about what happened. There's been mention, as CNN seemed to do, but if you do find any major coverage of what happened at Al-Ahli and the ongoing impacts of it, do please share it, because I'm not seeing very much at all. And I just don't understand why the story of Christians and why the stories of these atrocities, it is an absolute violation of international law for a hospital to be bombed, are just not being told. I'd encourage you to take a look at the statement that Churches for Middle East Peace put out yesterday. I'm so grateful for our incredible staff. One of our team members was in Japan visiting his parents. He's on PTO. And he ended up drafting the statement, and other team members rallied during Palm Sunday. I was on the processional with the Palms in Jerusalem, while we were seeking to get the statement out as quickly as possible, which came out roughly around 8 or 9 o'clock yesterday morning, East Coast time. Please, please, please share our statements. Use your voices to talk about what's happening and to talk about the dehumanization of Palestinians, and how we in the US, but around the world, not only need to know what's happening, but to be using our voices and our power and to take action to bring an end to it. So call your members of Congress, call your 2 senators, call your representative, and tell them there just was a Christian hospital that was bombed. This is just one example of many, causing further death, destruction, and violence against the civilian population of Gaza. Call on the United States to hold Israel to account and for such acts of impunity. Hamas, I wanted to give you an update about a ceasefire proposal. Hamas did refuse the latest proposal that came from Egypt for a ceasefire deal that was including disarmament. So Al Jazeera reported this, and then Haaretz reported on Al Jazeera's report. Egypt was presented a new ceasefire proposal. It was a 45-day truce agreement in exchange for the entry of food and shelter. The idea of food for 2 million people being used as a leverage point to try to get a deal is so astounding. According to the official, the plan calls for the release of half of the Israeli hostages. You'll recall Hamas had proposed 5 or 6 hostages in exchange for 40 days of a ceasefire. Israel and the United States had said 10. And so now they're saying half of the 65 hostages that remain, who are both dead and alive. The Hamas delegation was reportedly surprised to find that the proposal explicitly includes a clause calling for the disarmament of Palestinian factions. The official added that Egypt clarified that any deal to end the war would have to address the issue of disarmament. And Hamas responded, stressing that any agreement must begin with a ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal, not disarmament, which they said is not up for negotiation. I was speaking to someone who knows many of the dynamics at play within the different Palestinian communities. And he said, if people think that Hamas is going to disarm at this point, they are just kidding themselves. According to the official, this is now back to the Al Jazeera report, the proposal conditions extending the truce and continuing humanitarian aid on the return of all the Israeli hostages, both living and dead, by the end of the 45th day period. And one of the things that we've heard is that, Hamas and the negotiators on that side have no trust in the United States or Israel because there was a three-part deal in place. As you know, part one was implemented where 33 hostages and subsequent prisoners were released. But then the U.S. said that they would hold Israel accountable, and Israel backed out of the deal, and it did not progress into phase 2 or phase 3. Israel will soon, quote, vigorously, end quote, expand its offensive throughout most of Gaza. When I hear things like this, I don't even have words. When I think people listening, please, please, please understand the attacks on Gaza and the pressure that is being applied to the community of Gaza right now is so much worse than it was prior to this temporary ceasefire. And let me tell you why. The population of Gaza is living on roughly a third of the entire territory. Not only that, they now have been without additional water, humanitarian assistance, and food for more than 6 weeks. There has been a complete siege. Gaza is literally being suffocated right before our eyes while it's being bombed, while there is an army that is fighting against militants in the midst of civilians. And so when you hear things like, well, Hamas was in the civilian population, it's one of the most populated areas of the earth. I mean, yes. And Hamas is violating international law and the Israeli government is violating international law. So the idea of Israel vigorously expanding its offensive is just beyond comprehension. The defense minister said this weekend, he added that the IDF has completed the takeover of the security zone. They cut off the city of Rafah from Han Yunis in the territory south. What that's talking about is there now is there's a separation between South Gaza. So not only the Netzarim corridor, there's now another corridor that completely separates Rafah from Han Yunis. A UN Office Commissioner from Human Rights spokesperson said on Friday that the UN is increasingly concerned that the cumulative impact of Israel's actions on Palestinians in Gaza appears to be inflicting conditions of life increasingly incompatible with their continued existence as a group. Ethnic cleansing or genocide, whatever term you deem to use. A missing Palestinian Red Crescent paramedic who went missing during Israel's attack on the 15 humanitarian workers in late March was found to be detained by Israeli militaries. The Rescue Service and Red Cross said yesterday there were explosions at a UN guest house in Gaza that killed a European aid worker and severely wounded 5 others last month. They were likely caused by 2 Israeli tank shells, according to expert analysis of images of the scene that were obtained by the Washington Post. A Hamas official said today that the group is sending a delegation to Qatar to continue ceasefire talks with Israel over the war on Gaza. And the parents of the American-Israeli soldier, Aidan Alexander, responded yesterday, Sunday, to a newly released video from Hamas showing their son in captivity. The video is harrowing, said the mother, Yael Alexander. This was an interview on Channel 12 News. Our son is in the dark, crying out from his soul. A total of 1,525 current and former Israeli Armored Corps soldiers signed a letter calling for an immediate end to the war in Gaza and the return of hostages held by Hamas. The letter was also signed by 2 former Israeli Defense Forces chiefs of staff. That's the head of the IDF, 2 former heads of the IDF, Ehud Barak and Dan Halutz, both signed this letter. And around 170 current and former reservists in the IDF Elite Research and Development Program, Talpiot, signed a similar petition. I just want people to know that the civil society, and these are part of the military and security establishment, it's quite significant. They're calling for a ceasefire and the return of hostages, an immediate end to the war in Gaza. More than 3,000 educators in Israel signed a petition calling for the end to the war and the return of hostages. 3,500 Israeli academics also signed a similar petition. Shifting gears to Yemen, suspected Airstrikes by the United States around Yemen's capital killed at least 7 people and wounded 29 people in the last 24 hours. That's according to Houthi media sources. They also claimed that the Houthis also claimed to shoot down an American MQ-9 Reaper drone. The European Union will increase its financial support for the Palestinian Authority with a 3-year package that's worth about 1.6 billion euros or $1.8 billion. And in the occupied West Bank today, Palestinian Health Ministry reported 19-year-old Malik Ali Al-Khattab died of wounds that were sustained earlier today when he was shot by Israeli troops during a raid into the Al-Jalazon refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. Moving on to talking about Iran, there were preliminary diplomatic talks over the weekend between the U.S. and Iran. This is over Tehran's nuclear program. These happened on Saturday and were, quote, very positive and constructive, end quote. The White House did put out a statement about that. Iran sought sanctions relief in exchange for limits on their nuclear program during the negotiations. According to Iranian state television, the U.S. Middle East Special Envoy Steve Witkoff directly spoke with Iranian leaders during the talks, which are set to continue on April 19th. So those conversations will continue. But then today, President Trump warned Iran is nearing the capability to produce a nuclear weapon. He said the United States may take, quote, very harsh action, end quote, if Tehran does not change its course. He spoke from the Oval Office, reiterating his demand that Iran abandon any pursuit of nuclear arms. I just wanted to close today by just reading our statement from Al-Ahli Hospital. Might you hear this as a prayer on this Monday during the Holy Week as we think of the Passion of Christ and all that he suffered on our behalf. Again, this was written yesterday on Palm Sunday. On this blessed day of Palm Sunday, Christians around the world gather to worship and commemorate Jesus' entry into Jerusalem during one of the most sacred times of year as Holy Week begins. CMEP condemns in the strongest possible terms the bombing of Al-Ahli Hospital in Gaza. Al-Ahli is an Anglican institution and one of the oldest continually operating hospitals in Gaza. It is Gaza's only Christian hospital and its only cancer treatment center. The bombing of the Anglican Al-Ahli Arab Hospital is a violation of the sacredness of life, and it is especially abhorrent during this sacred time for Christians. The deliberate targeting of a medical facility is a clear violation of international law, a war crime, and a crime against humanity. This attack significantly damaged the facility. Already functioning under immense strain due to repeated attacks, the genetic laboratory was completely destroyed, the emergency department building and pharmacy significantly damaged, in addition to other collateral damage surrounding buildings, including the St. Philip's Church building. According to reports, 3 patients have died from the bombing, including a 12-year-old child. The destruction of this vital medical facility not only threatens the lives of those currently seeking treatment, but imperils the thousands who will be injured or fall ill in the days and weeks ahead due to the continued bombardment of North Gaza. This was then a quote from me that said, "We stand in solidarity with the Al-Ahli Hospital and all of the Christians in Gaza who must be protected alongside of their Muslim neighbors. The people of Gaza, just as Israelis and all people in the Middle East and the world, are precious in the eyes of God. In Gaza, the Christian community has decreased by more than 3% because of the deaths of Christians, and Christians are being eradicated as a result of the past 18 months of war and violence. The atrocities and violence must be brought to an end for the sake of all of the people of the Holy Land." That was an end to my quote. The closure of Al-Ahli means that cancer patients and others with chronic or life-threatening conditions may now die from entirely preventable causes. This is not only a humanitarian catastrophe, it is an affront to our shared human dignity, to the values that bind us together as people of faith. We call on the Trump administration and the U.S. government to withhold all weapons from Israel. They are being used to cause the decimation of the civilian population in Gaza and in violation of international law. We call on Christians, Americans, and all people of goodwill to demand a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire, an end to violence, the release of Israeli and international hostages held in Gaza and Palestinian prisoners held unjustly, and to pursue a negotiated settlement that will bring lasting resolution to the ongoing cycles of violence between Israelis and Palestinians. On this holy Palm Sunday, as Christians around the world remember the Prince of Peace entering Jerusalem with humility, we call on all people of faith to stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza. We must raise our voices against the destruction of this sacred place of healing and demand that attacks on civilian and civilian infrastructure come to an end. The Imago Dei, image of God, must be recognized in Palestinians in Gaza and in all of the occupied territories, just as our common humanity should be respected in all people, regardless of religion, culture, or ethnicity. For 556 days, and today 555, today 556 days, violence has continued. We must do more to ensure it does not continue for one day longer, to preserve life, and to hope for the future. Our faith calls us to not only speak out against injustice, but to act against it. Let us honor that call today and every day until peace and justice prevail. We stand alongside the Anglican Diocese of Jerusalem and pray and call for an end to this horrific war and the suffering of so many. In the name of Christ, amen.